What's up? What's up? What's up? Welcome back to the Unscripted Order Podcast. I'm B Smalls.
Yes, indeed. And I'm Bugg. Welcome back, folks. Welcome back.
We are so excited to be back again. Thrilled by the support y'all been showing us on social media and on YouTube. But if you aren't already following us on our Instagram page, go head over to the Unscripted Order Instagram page and give us a follow there. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel, the Unscripted Order Podcast YouTube channel. And then you can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Either place you can listen to the pod there as well. So yeah, give us a look.
Yeah, we're everywhere. As they would say, we are in these streets, folks. But we need you to know, just because this is a law-related podcast and we're talking about the law, nothing here creates any type of attorney-client relationship. And we're certainly not giving out legal advice. If you have actual legal questions about an ongoing situation, you must and we recommend that you reach out to an attorney licensed to practice law in your area. But this here is for entertainment and informational purposes only.
You reach out to us now. We ain't got nothing for you.
Not a thing. Not a thing. Not a thing.
Yeah. So what's been going on, man?
A lot. You know, it was interesting. We talked in the last episode about balancing the demands of the job and personal life. And I will say the work got very busy. We got quite a few things going on, but we're making it through all of those things. And also got a chance to go out and see my Terps play this weekend. So getting a little balance in.
Okay. All right. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to watch some real football, Michigan's going to be playing this weekend against Nebraska. That's real football. I don't know who the Terps was playing, but
We need football minus cheating. I like it to be, straight up. So I'll stick with my alma mater, but I understand.
Man.
How things been for you?
Everything's been good, man. I just been, just with school year being back in, court, picks back up this time of year. Not that we ever really get a break, but, the summertime, a lot of the stuff that we see involving the students and schools, we don't see because they're not in session, but we stay plenty of busy over the summertime. So, but yeah, no, things been good, man. I've been listening to that new Clips is still on in the rotation.
Yeah.
Pusha T, man, and Malice, they from right here in the 757, so we gotta support them,
Definitely gotta support.
Yeah, and and then their tour just came to an end, and they closed out in Baltimore.
Yeah.
And I think it was last Thursday, and I'm sitting there because I didn't, and I think we talked about this. I didn't get to the local shows here in Virginia, and in my mind, I'm trying to figure out, all right, how do I make it to Baltimore?
And back to court in time?
Back to court
on Friday.
on Friday.
I've been there.
Yeah, but just I couldn't justify it. So
yeah, you gotta pick and choose. We'll catch them somewhere else.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw, they actually just performed at the Vatican. First rap group to ever perform at the Vatican, of course, with Pharrell and John Legend. But that's pretty dope.
I can say I've been to the Vatican. That's not a place you would expect any rap group, let alone the Clips. That's saying something. That's saying something. Man.
Well, I was waiting to see what song they were going to do. I thought they was going to say Yellow.
There's only one option.
I thought maybe they're going to be talking about Yellow Diamonds Look Like Pee-Pee,
There's only one song they could.
Yeah, when I heard that lyric, Yellow Diamonds Look Like Pee-Pee, I was like, hold up, what is he talking about, But apparently I don't have enough money to know that apparently that is a way, I guess it's some type of way that they measure the diamonds or whatnot. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. That's
You did more research than me. I just thought it was a cool line. I know I can't afford it. As you know, we are on a fixed government salary. So
we are government employees. Contrary to popular belief, we are government employees.
And that's a great lead in to today's episode of what people think versus the reality of a judgeship. I didn't want to steal your thunder on the transition.
No.
It flowed.
No, it really did. It really did.
Yeah.
So today, last week we talked about judges and always being on and the pressures of the position. Today, we kind of want to talk about the misconceptions of, I think, courtrooms, I think also our process as well. And so yeah, so let's go ahead and dive right in. I know, we've all seen the TV shows. It's just one of those things where a lot of what you see on television, whether it be Law and Order or, Judge Mathis, who's one of my favorites on the TV circuit. There's a lot of, I think, misconceptions, I think. What are some of the things I think maybe you've seen, maybe that has come out of Hollywood that's just, or just, contrast kind of what we see on television to what we actually see on a
Yeah.
day-to-day basis.
I was instructing a jury recently, and one of my jury instructions tells them that I assure you this is not going to operate the way you see it on television. And I say that regarding whether or not jurors take notes, because we have a court reporter. And one of the things you see on TV all the time is somebody's not paying attention or they really want to cross examine and hammer home the point, and they'll turn to the court reporter and say, "Can you read that back to me?" And that doesn't happen in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Obviously, I don't think it happens in many jurisdictions where you have the court reporter actually read things back, but you have to tell folks that it's not what you see on TV. On television, it wraps up in 30 minutes or an hour and it's engaging the entire time. And that's certainly not what happens in court. I will say I don't watch a lot of legal related television shows because of that. It's from in crime to investigation to conviction in 45 or 50 minutes. All right. And what used to really, really get me, especially in private practice, and even now, you will watch this show where there's the defendant that's being interrogated by the police officer or detective in the jail cell, and their attorney is right beside them, and they proceed to confess and spill the beans, and the defense attorney just doesn't
Just
say
let
anything.
them do
It
it.
just doesn't say a word. It's like that's not how it happens, right? So a lot of times you get that, but obviously for TV it has to be dramatized. Some of the process is not even the high profile and the salacious cases that are on court TV or the things that draw people in on a regular basis. They're not showing you start to finish. They're showing you once we actually get to trial. They're usually not showing motions days or they're not showing a bond hearing or an arraignment. And those other parts I don't think a lot of people get. So especially in circuit court, dealing with juries, having to instruct a jury and trying to make that distinction that I'm not going to be I may not say it, but try to set that expectation that you're not going to get that television judge in the midst of this. This is going to be following proper procedure and courtroom protocol.
Yeah. And you're definitely not going to see it at the district court level like it looks
Yeah.
on TV. But contrary to my good friend Judge Bugg, I actually love watching the court TV shows. And look, I'm into, the Law and Order and, I just, and it's more so for the entertainment value because I'll sit there and kind of like you, I'll look at the stuff and like, look, that's not happening like that.
Yeah. I
you
just
know,
imagine it's I just imagine it's how like doctors look at Grey's Anatomy and they're like,
oh,
that's not
have
it.
to, have to. Yeah, it has to be. But yeah, I mean, I'm only looking at it for entertainment, purposes.
Yeah.
They have some good storylines, But no, I mean, to your point, I think what people see on television is totally different than obviously what they see when they come to court. And I think that as a result of that, when they come, they really, they don't know what to expect. And
True.
I can't tell you how many times people will come to court and look like a deer in the headlights because they're having to come in and sit through the process and they may be there for the better part of their day, depending on, what kind of case they're coming in for. And trust me, if that docket say 9 o'clock, your case, probably not going to be called at 9 o'clock.
Especially in
Um,
JDR.
especially in JDR court. It's just one of those things where I think the perception of what court is and the
Mhm.
reality of what it actually is it's just two different things.
Yeah.
And so, when people come in just, going through, questions with them sitting there listening to other people's cases. It's just vastly different than what you see when you're watching television. Because on television, it's usually just that one case and that's the only thing they're talking about. But you come in on a district court docket and you've got all kinds of stuff going on, all kinds of different cases, and it's just one of those things where it's different.
It's a lot. Can be a lot. You said something about people being deer in headlights or just that experience of being in court, and it reminded me of a family member that I represented once down in the 757. I think it was a reckless driving down in Hampton. The family member remained unnamed, but she knows who she is. But it was a reckless, anything in the Commonwealth over 80 is reckless driving. It was legitimately an 81 and a 55, maybe a 65, something that typically with a decent driving record, depending on the area, you'll get it broken down. So I go down, I'm with this family member. And when I tell you the way she cried and shook when we stood up in front of the judge, but, and we tell that story jokingly now, but it really is a reminder that for us as well as judges, when people are coming before you, you have to be mindful that there are a lot of folks. There are some people that are, well versed being in a courtroom, but there are other people who are not used to being there. There are folks that, especially if they're the defendant or they are a party to a case, but I've also talked to folks that were just witnesses and they were, really, really afraid of being cross-examined and like being afraid of the judge or the deputy. So a lot of that, obviously we understand that, it comes from, not being there, but I think it's important for us to be mindful of that because we are in a different position now where we sit in court every day. And sometimes the formality of it, the routine of it becomes routine, but being mindful of the fact that not everybody's used to being in here. These, the high ceilings, the bright lights, and everybody seems to be talking a language that you don't even understand. So
Yeah, no, and just to piggyback off of that, I mean, you got to think more often than not when people come to court, it's probably the worst day of their life that they're having to
mhm,
relive and experience, and now they've got to come back, whether they are, the victim in a case or they're a party to the case, and they've had something wrong done to them, or they're the defendant,
yeah.
or they could just be, a witness. I will tell you, so back when I was an attorney, I represented an individual, and it is not uncommon, as you know, it is not uncommon for lawyers and their clients not to see eye to eye on every single issue.
So that's a
And
nice way to put it. It's a nice way to put it.
well, we try to be nice around here. But there was a particular case, and without getting into all the details about it, my client and I had a disagreement
Mhm,
after a plea was entered. And as a result of this disagreement, he decided he no longer wanted me to represent him.
mhm,
And what ultimately ended up happening was he threatened a bar complaint, basically, said that I had coerced him into taking this plea. And what ultimately ended up happening is I ended up as a witness, okay, in the circuit court, having to testify about this entire situation because the judge was having to consider whether he should allow this individual to basically withdraw the plea. And, ultimately at the end of the day, I remember getting up on the witness stand and we're in circuit court. And it was a day where it was jam packed in there. I can remember getting up on the witness stand. And here I am, a seasoned attorney, been doing this now for, several years. And I remember getting up on that witness stand and being so nervous and anxious getting up there. And it really, forced me to really, how I had to reevaluate how I saw people when they went
mhm,
up on the witness stand. And just because, like you were saying, for us now, obviously, especially as judges, it becomes, the everyday thing. We're used to it. And we kind of know how these cases are going to kind of go along, depending on what the evidence is and depending on, what ultimately ends up coming out from an evidentiary standpoint and pleas get worked out and all that kind of stuff. But the reality of the situation is for the person who is coming in, who isn't here every day, who isn't at the
mhm,
courthouse every day, this is like it could be one of the most traumatic experiences that they ever experience in their life. And so I think as judges have to be mindful of that when folks are in front of the court
yeah.
and just having a little bit of empathy, when they are, going through the situations, particularly the witnesses who are here, that they just happen to be, I will say
Yeah.
wrong place, wrong time, but they just happen to observe something. And now they're having to
Mhm.
come to testify about it.
Yeah.
And that can be a scary experience. And
Yeah.
then we got some folks that, we see them on a regular basis. And they're as versed in the process as we are, and that's, it's a little concerning, but it's a fact of life.
Mm.
But yeah, it's something that we really have to keep in mind when
Yeah.
we're dealing with the people that come before us. Yeah, so let's transition a little bit and let's talk about, I think, some of the misconceptions about judges. Them say, what are some of the things that you think that there are misconceptions or misperceptions about
Yeah.
judges, and how they are, whether it be in the courtroom or outside.
Well, I think one of the first that pops to mind is this idea that because you're a judge, you know everything about the law, every area of the law, and every statute. And the level of legal questions when I was an attorney were significant, but you could explain to someone, hey, I only do criminal defense or I only do domestic relations. Let me refer you to someone else. But you'll get a question about it. As a judge, what do you think about this? And it's like, I have not looked at that particular statute, or you're in Minnesota and I know nothing about the law in Minnesota. Or just this idea that because we have, a criminal docket or misdemeanor appeals docket, that the judge is prepared for and knows everything about every particular case on that docket. And sometimes when issues arise, if you're doing the job the right way, you have to take a recess and educate yourself on that. One thing I recall very vividly from rookie school was, I don't remember who said it, but they said, there's nothing wrong with turning to the attorneys in a case if you're not familiar with a certain area of law, or you're not familiar with a statute or a particular rule that they're talking about, to turn to the attorneys or even the party and ask for them to educate you on it. And if you need to take a recess and do the research, because it's better to take that time on the front end as opposed to try to make a decision just for the sake of time. But I think there are a lot of times folks will, you hear the familiar phrase, well, as I'm sure the court is familiar with. And I'm thinking to myself, if you did your research on me, I practice criminal defense and domestic relations, and we are standing here in a medical malpractice case or a wrongful death suit. I'm not sure what you think I'm familiar with, but I guarantee you, if you tell me about it, I'm going to take this recess in a moment and I'm going to figure it out, or I'm going to get my law clerk's assistants to start on it before I take that recess. But that line always kind of sits with me, as I'm sure the court's familiar with. You're
A lot of
making a
times
gigantic assumption.
yeah, well, a lot of times you'll see judges, they just kind of go along with it because they
Yeah.
they don't want to feel out of place or whatnot.
Yeah,
But no, I mean,
I have no problem saying, counsel, I can tell you this is my first type case of X, or I
yeah,
have not had quite a few of these. And if you can educate me on that, because, there are other times when I am fully versed on it and I'll try to deliver that message that, counsel, I'm aware of that and I understand your argument, but I'm asking X, and they don't hear that message either. They just continue to explain it to me and not answer the question. But
yeah, no, I mean, I think that it is important to know that we're human beings.
yeah,
We're not robots. We're not AI. We don't know everything. But I think the one thing, my law school folks are not going to like this too much. I think law school teaches you how to be great law students, not necessarily, best on, educating us on like how to actually be an attorney. Because, the reality is a lot of stuff we learn, once you become an attorney.
that's true.
But one of
That's
the things
true.
I will say, I'll give credit to law school is that if you don't know the answer to something, law school teaches you how to figure out what the answer is.
Know how
And
to
I
find
think
it.
that,
Yeah.
or how to find the answer,
Yeah.
right? Where to go to. And I think that's one of
Mhm.
the big reasons why I think, law schools are important, because they do. They teach you how to get to the answers, or at least find the answers if you don't know it. And so I have no shame in saying I don't know absolutely everything. And I think especially when you're a newer judge or you're a young judge, it is really highlighted. And I can remember being like in a trial where I had two very seasoned attorneys, and I'm feeling intimidated up there because I know they know this stuff way better than I do.
Yeah.
And so now, I've got to, not be prideful enough that, that I know that, hey, I need to take a break.
Hmm.
And one of the things I'm sure you guys probably had it as well, but when you're a new judge in Virginia, they assign you a mentor judge.
Yes.
And my mentor judge, phenomenal, Jay Duggar. Shout out to Judge Duggar down in Hampton, the chief judge in Hampton, JDR. He was my mentor judge. And I had no problem shooting Jay a text
Hmm.
like, "Hey, are you on the bench right now? Because I need
Hmm.
some guidance here."
Yeah.
And I would run something by him. In the they assign you to judge, and they're assigned to you technically for a year. But Jay was always like, "Look, whenever you got a question, don't
Yeah.
hesitate to reach out." And so even
Yeah.
beyond my first year on the bench, I would reach out to Jay, and Jay always gave me good insight. He never told me what to do, which I appreciated, but he told me, "Look, this would be my thought process. Did you think about
Yeah.
this?"
Yeah.
And so, the perception that judges know absolutely everything is just, it's not true. And
Yeah.
if there's a judge that will tell you they know absolutely everything, they lied to you. I mean, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just
And
one
they
of those
lie.
things. Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where, we don't know everything. And
No,
it's,
we don't.
and
And there's
there's,
nothing.
no,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, and there's
Because I
nothing
think you're
wrong
about
with
to
it.
say what I was going to say.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with admitting that. I think
Nope.
it's a great quality to be able to say as a judge that I need to educate myself on it, and especially being humble enough or understanding enough that maybe you need to ask questions, consult with another judge and get a different perspective, or at least talk it out. I think a lot of times you really hit on something, that asking questions of your mentor judge. I was assigned a mentor judge, but again, we're fortunate enough. We have 15 circuit court judges. So I literally can step off of my bench, and usually in the hallway I'm going to run into a judge, or I can ask my clerk, hey, can you send an email and see if judge such and such can step off the bench, and other judges will do that, and we don't get the answer from anyone else. But being able to talk it out sometimes, even in that kind of pro and con, I don't want to use the phrase devil's advocate, but plaintiff versus defendant, to think an issue through, or the application of the law, or even again, where to perhaps find the answer if that judge has not had the experience of dealing with that, or it's something new to them, is very beneficial. It's very beneficial to be able to talk those things out, and understanding that even if it's something that may be routine, sometimes I'll find myself, I did the bulk of my practice was criminal defense, but I still have moments when I get off the bench and will talk to another judge about their thoughts on a criminal defense, or not criminal defense, but a criminal law related question. Even though that was the bread and butter of my practice, there are still issues that come up that take some time. And sometimes we had this conversation before we got started, in district court versus circuit court, your decisions are coming a little bit quicker, and there's not a letter opinions or written, or as
Sure.
many written orders. A lot of times we have to take things under advisement. So you can be set for a 2-day trial, and I can take in all of the evidence, but depending on the amount of evidence or legal issues that are raised, sometimes we have to take those cases under advisement, which means we need more time, quite frankly, to rule. So it may be set out 2 weeks, it may be set out a month, depending on the severity or complexity of the case. And that time is devoted to, along with our other workload, researching those legal issues, reviewing the exhibits, and formulating our opinion, but taking the time to do it and trying to take the time to get it right based on what the facts of the case are and the law says we should do in that case, as opposed to just rushing through it.
Yeah, and but on the district court side of things, the recommendation is that you make a decision, like that day. And so, especially my custody visitation cases, I'm sitting there for, hours listening to evidence. I'm typically not going to be able to just, spout off exactly what the decision is
Mhm.
right then. So what I will do is I'll take a recess. And it may take me 20 minutes to come back. It may take me an hour to come back. But I want to make sure that I've digested everything that I've
Yeah.
heard. I'm looking at my notes. If there's already an order in place and it's a motion to amend, I want to make sure I'm looking at what is currently the framework that I'm dealing with. And all right, should we make a change from
Yeah.
what is already in place based on what I heard here today? Is a material change in circumstance. And so, but the decision more often than not is going to come down that day. The only time that I'm going to continue a case, I had a situation where I went to run guidelines, and y'all use silverware. Y'all use silverware to run guidelines? Or
We
y'all
use
run?
something different. It's
Okay.
Vader. We use
Okay.
Vader.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Vader, silverware, basically the same thing. But,
Mhm.
when you're running support guidelines, whether it be for child support or for spousal support, there are computer programs in which you can input information and it will give you basically the number of what a person is supposed to be paying for support. And I've got some thoughts on that. We won't get into that today, okay, how that process works. It can be a rather unforgiving, harsh process, but it is what it is when it comes to support numbers. Um, but the point that I wanted to make was that recently I had to continue a case because I got, the financial information I needed from the parties. And when I went to fire up silverware, it didn't work. And I was trying to figure out what was going on. I later went back and looked. There was an email that apparently there was an issue that they'd had and it needed to be updated. So I ended up having to reach out to the Supreme Court of Virginia and have somebody there basically renew my license or something for the software. But that's typically the only time I'm going to, continue a case as far as making a decision.
Yeah.
And
You
that
didn't
was
you didn't break out the code and break out the piece of paper and the
no sir.
notepad and
No, because again, who's a
you
Clint
know you
Eastwood to say? I think Clint Eastwood said a man's got to know his limitations, and I'm not doing that.
long form math is
No, brother. No, that's not me.
it's
That
in the
is not
code.
me. It's
It's
in
in
the
the code.
code. Oh, it's there. Yeah, just go to 20 dash whatever 108
Yeah.
108.1.
Mhm.
You can go right there and do some calculations. But no, that's not
Yeah.
the kid. Not the
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah. That's right. The
You
sometimes one number off on those guidelines can make a
yeah.
big difference, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you want to make sure you're doing it the right way. So if that means that the parties have to come back, then it is what it is. But I want to make sure that I get it right because I'd much rather
Mhm.
get it right and you have to come back than me get it wrong. And somebody's paying the wrong thing because
Yeah.
the judge's math was off. No,
Yeah.
there's no need to do that.
Yeah.
So one one of the things, and I think this be a hot topic. Sometimes there is a perception, especially if you are coming to court and you are a defendant, or maybe not even defendant, maybe you're just a party to a case, and maybe you've been to court on multiple occasions. There can be a perception that, man, the judge is out to get me. That's what judges do. You know, talk a little bit about that. What are your thoughts? I mean, obviously, as a judge now, what are your thoughts? But you can even reflect back to when you were an attorney, if you want to, and then juxtapose that against what you experience now as a judge.
I have to say I don't know if, at least in my experience, I have run across anyone, whether I was in private practice or even being a judge now and associating with other judges, that I would say is out to get anyone. For the most part, I think and the judges that are doing the job the right way, their goal is to get it right. Sometimes people may see what is or what are some of the other pressures that impact a docket. So a timeliness thing, I know there are certain circumstances, especially in a district court or a busy traffic court, where folks may feel, oh, the judge didn't fully hear me out. And, unfortunately, that may be due to time constraints and not being able to let every case run 30 and 40 minutes because you have a 200 plus case docket. It would just slow down the administration of justice. It would bring it to a halt, right? So I know that there are those things that people see, but in terms of, and I can really only speak for myself and what I've seen and experienced, but for myself, a lot of times our cases, we don't have them, especially in a jurisdiction like Fairfax, with the size of our court, we don't typically follow cases. There are a few cases that are assigned to us because of the complexity of it or the length of
Sure,
trial. So it's helpful to have a judge make all of the pretrial rulings. But with the
sure,
number of hundreds of thousands of cases, I had the experience of being on the statewide commission that goes into doing all the research and compiling the numbers and the resources that are needed for each jurisdiction that is at least in some way used by the General Assembly when they make decisions on how many judges should be in each county or city and each level of court there. And understanding, just again speaking for Fairfax, the number of cases that we have every year with 15 judges, we can't follow cases. It really would slow down everything if it's like I got to get this person. I have to have this case. Quite often it is as soon as you finish one case, the court requires that you kind of have to wipe the slate and move on to the next one. We don't usually see our dockets until the Thursday before the next week. So I don't know until this Thursday, I will find out what I'm supposed to have for next week. But based on continuances, cases settling, sometimes you'll walk in that morning and a case will settle. We have a civil holding docket, so there can be 11, 12, 20 plus cases on civil holding. It really is kind of a lottery pick of what may end up on your desk. Sometimes you may have only 30 minutes to review a file and start a 2 or 3 day trial. So that idea that the judge is just out to get me, obviously in criminal cases for us, we'll see folks on a more regular basis because we'll sentence them if there are probation violations. The person will come back
Sure.
to us. So you have more contact in a criminal context if someone is sentenced and there are repeat show causes or revocation hearings. But just given the amount of work, the idea of being out for somebody, and even at that, is it really worth? I mean, I guess the question I would ask is it really worth your job to be out for somebody, for one particular person, or take any kind of inappropriate interest in a particular case? We see across the country all the headlines of judges that do things that you're just like, why on earth would you think that would be the right idea, right? So to be out for somebody, I don't see the value in it. Thankfully, in terms of experience, I haven't seen it in a particular case where it was aimed at anyone or witnessed it, but it's not worth it. It really isn't worth it.
I think part of the reason why, a person might feel like that might be the case is because, like you said, there are, outside things, judges are human beings, they're people. And so they'll come to work and, you hear just saying they got up on the wrong side of the bed or
Sometimes it's a
whatnot.
bad day.
And sometimes it's a bad day, and it's not necessarily that the judge is out to get you per se, but
Mhm.
if they're having a bad day, it may mean that the way that they talk to you, or maybe they're short, like you said, they could be short with you because their docket is really, really big, and they are kind of being short with everybody. But the thing that we have to keep in mind as judges is that, for us, yes, it's a long docket, yes, it's a big day, but for those folks who are in front of them, that is the most important
True.
case,
It's their only day too sometimes.
and it's their only day. And so we have to also be mindful of that. And so,
Mhm.
and we kind of touched on this earlier, but the reality is that yes, we do this, each and every day, all day. And, the reality is that if we are doing it the right way, we are mindful of the fact that the people who are coming before us are probably not doing this every day. And,
Mhm.
you hope they're not doing it every day. And
And
it's, go ahead.
I'm sorry. And I was going to say, and being able to check yourself when you need to, being
Absolutely.
able to take a recess. I catch myself very frequently before I
Hmm.
respond. The court's going to take a recess.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned it last time. One of our other judges, Judge Kasabian, he would take mental health walks. And I do the same thing. If you ever see me walking up and down the hallway, just clicking my pen, it's a mental health walk.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have to
Yeah.
check myself, and they're very effective. You can think about it, you come back. A lot of times I don't even really address whatever maybe the big issue was and take back over control of the courtroom and go right back to business as we need to. But being able to check yourself on that, I think, is really, really big, because if you don't, you can get into these back and forths that you see or you hear about, and it's like it just continues to escalate and escalate. And at some point, as the judge, we have to be the person that disengages, because we're there to perform a role and serve, and not let the emotion take us over.
No, absolutely. And that looks different for different folks, but it's just one of those things. And also from an ethical standpoint, we also have ethical
Hmm.
obligations as judges as
Hmm.
well that we are to, and you kind of alluded to that, you don't want to get so personally invested in a matter that it, you know, shapes or changes how you do business. So yeah, so that's important. We're making sure that we're maintaining our ethical obligations as well. So that is, yeah, definitely don't want to get out of line as it relates to that. So
Yeah. Other thing I'll mention on that too, one thing that helps to help you watch your mouth, I have a note on my desk, on my bench that says watch what you say. But it came from the experience of reading one of my first trial transcripts. And, I just read it and I'm thinking to myself, I know I said it, but it doesn't sound the way I thought I said it when I read it. Like the
yeah,
black and white words on the paper, or the
they look a
black words
lot
on the white
different.
paper,
Yeah,
it comes across a lot different. And that's one of those reminders of like, you know what? Just sometimes less is more up there. Sometimes you
yeah,
talk when you need to talk, you ask the appropriate question, and otherwise you should be a good listener.
yeah. So just to educate people real quick, so you said at the circuit court level, and in Virginia, the circuit court level is a court of record. And that means there's always somebody down there, a young lady, young man, typing away, recording everything that you were saying. And I sit in the
Creating a
district,
record.
creating a record. And I
Yeah.
sit in the district court. And the only time that there is a court reporter there is if, it's a criminal case and a defense attorney has requested a court reporter, or it's more frequently a custody case visitation where you've got civil attorneys who have requested a court reporter be present to preserve the record so that in the event it goes to circuit court, they will have that record once they go to circuit court if they need to do it for impeachment purposes or whatnot. And so, yeah, that was one one of the benefits of sitting at the district court level. I don't have to read what I
Yeah.
say as often,
Yeah.
but I still have to be mindful of what I'm
Yeah.
saying,
You
and
definitely do.
and just as importantly, how I'm saying it, because that plays a significant role. And look, I want people to come to court and feel like they've been heard. I want them to have an experience because our system doesn't work if people don't have a trust in it. And a big part
Yes.
of people having a trust in the system is whether the judges that they go in front of, treat them with respect and dignity. And,
Yes.
look, there's a lot that comes before me. I certainly don't agree with obviously what has been done, but as a judge, I do feel I do have an obligation to everybody that comes before me to be respectful.
Mhm.
And again, doesn't mean that I'm not going to, hand out a jail sentence if it's
Yeah.
required under the law. But, I can at least do it in a manner that is respectful for the people who are
Yeah.
are, are coming before me. So,
That's true. And one other thing that you mentioned about the record, the other thing, and I think that leads into kind of one of the other topics we were going to transition into about just being able to do whatever we want to do, or just making it up on the fly, or just ruling. And we're bound by what the law tells us we can and cannot do, what our jurisdiction or authority is. But being a circuit court and being a court of record, people have a right to appeal their case to a higher court, the Court of Appeals. And this is kind of that lesson part of the structure of courts. But the higher court, the Court of Appeals, they don't have trials. So all appeals, excuse me, all appeals are based on the record. It's that transcript, it's the exhibits that come into evidence and the arguments and the briefs on behalf of both parties. And the Court of Appeals, when they rule in written opinion. And they issue those on certain days of the week. And everyone across the state knows that they come out. So that's another check that if you're not doing the job the right way, you have that appellate court that has no problem. Our appellate courts have no problem issuing opinions and correcting or stating for the record exactly how a judge committed error, whether it was harmless error or not harmless error. And sometimes they can take you to task for those mistakes and errors. And I know there are a lot more people in the Commonwealth that read those as regularly than you would think. Hey, so that's another incentive that at the trial level, you want to get it right at the trial level, knowing that there's obviously the right to appeal. And if you make a mistake, obviously you can learn from those things. Not to say that every case is perfect, just for the fact that I don't want to get overturned. But I think that's something else that you have to be mindful of. I know for myself, especially in recent trials, I'm much more mindful of making sure that when there's an objection, we are clearly stating for the record what exhibit number it is, what page we're talking about, the lines we're talking about, so that when I make my ruling, it's clear what happened in the trial court. A lot of times you'll have people just kind of blazing through exhibits and asking questions, and then you read the transcript, and it's not really clear what actually went on. So,
Right.
from an appellate standpoint, you have to be mindful that you're creating a record, making sure that people are speaking into the microphone so that they can be heard or picked up by the court reporter. It's a lot of those nuances that, if you walk in as a practicing attorney or even a pro se litigant, you wouldn't even think of those things, but it's kind of that different view when you're sitting there knowing that there's a record being made and there's the potential for appeals.
You know what, Judge Bug, that is a perfect segue
Right.
to talk about maybe some of the misconceptions or misperceptions about the folks who come to court. So
Mhm.
whether that be one of the parties, better known as litigants, or the lawyers, so talk about, what are some of the maybe misconceptions or misperceptions, that we might see, when we're talking about folks who are in court, whether they be folks that come on a regular basis or not.
Yeah, I think it depends on what type of case you're thinking about. I know folks can think that every person that comes to court on a criminal case is a criminal. There are a lot of things that fall under criminal law that, depending on how you define being a criminal, could be a misdemeanor or something. There are traffic infractions. There are things you can do behind the wheel of a car that are criminal in nature. For the most part, I think what you see is a lot of times, especially get a chance to perhaps find out more about a person through a pre-sentence investigation report or whether it's representing someone. A lot of times, what you see is there are people that end up in criminal court, and that was a blip on the radar. The rest of their life does not match whatever happened that night or whatever they were involved in. And sometimes, again, from personal experience of representing people, not to excuse or justify anything, but sometimes you can get to understand why a person perhaps felt that that was an act of necessity in that moment for them, of what they needed to do, whether it was financial or whether it was an incomplete self-defense type of thing, if we're talking about something assaultive. I think if you're talking more about the attorneys that come to court, I think one of the biggest things that surprised me is really the wide range of attorney styles, experience levels, and techniques and tech, and what you'll see when you're doing criminal defense and a lot of traffic stuff. A lot of your time is spent in the hallway waiting to talk to the prosecutor, talking to other defense attorneys, talking to the detective or the police officer on your case. And when you're in the courtroom, it's usually to deal with your trial, deal with your plea. Sometimes you may sit in on some other cases just to kind of see how other people are doing, but you don't get that view of the everyday of range of lawyering that you will
That you
see. And I
see it.
think you don't see a lot of that again if most people are getting their perception of what happens in a courtroom from maybe what we see on TV or now social media. You have, your attorneys that are doing really good jobs of advertising through social media with the reels and putting forth a persona. And then, you might see that attorney in court and you're like, oh, okay, well, you're probably better on Instagram than you
On
are,
TikTok.
at the rules of evidence, but marketing is marketing.
Yeah.
So, sometimes, and I think, obviously in terms of, touching on that marketing, I think sometimes it's a business. So there is the aspect of marketing, and sometimes people can be really great at marketing and perhaps sometimes the substance is not there. So, but obviously you don't see, I think TV shows is kind of two extremes. You either have the super, well put together, attorney that wins just about every case up against the toughest prosecutor in that scenario, or you have the bumbling attorney that comes in and the papers are falling out everywhere and their shirt's untucked and, you don't really get the in between. But again, I think a lot of that has to be dramatized. And, if you saw what happened in court every day, again, it wouldn't necessarily be must see TV for some of those things, right?
No, I definitely agree with you on that. Yeah, there are also situations to piggyback on the people that come before us. Yeah, something might have, you'll have those folks who maybe do something, they make a poor decision, poor choice that leads them into a courtroom. But then, I mean, we have the frequent flyers, the folks who do come back before us, time and time again. But then you'll have the folks who are struggling from a mental health standpoint,
Hmm.
or there is an addiction that they are dealing with, or oftentimes there's a combination of the two, mental
Hmm.
health and addiction, and you get those things combined, and you have folks that find themselves in court on a fairly regular basis. And It doesn't make them necessarily horrible people, but what it does do is it puts them at risk for repeated contacts
Yeah.
with our system. And so, you know, it is a rarity that you know that somebody comes before me and I'm like, this is, just a despicable, unredeemable human being. But those folks are out there. They're definitely out there. I just say that they're not as many people I think they come before me anyways, at least at the
Hmm.
district court level.
Hmm.
But, there are definitely folks who do find themselves in front of the court that, you know, probably do fit that bill of actually being, the criminals. And
Yeah.
usually when you see that, you look at the lengthy history and the record, and it goes back for, 15, 20, 30 years, of just long, rap sheet. And, it is what it is. But, when you're dealing with folks who have mental health issues and you have substance abuse issues, that combination can lead to folks coming into court more often than obviously that you would like to see. But I'm sure it's probably more often they would want to be there as well,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right, so we're gonna transition to a little segment we like to call off the record, and off the record is a segment we do. It's kind of lighthearted. It can be, might be funny, or maybe it might even be serious. But whatever the situation is, it's just something that's different. So this episode, obviously, we've been talking about TV courtroom versus real life courtroom, and so is there a particular courtroom moment from television, whether it be from a TV show or a movie, that kind of stands out in your mind? So I don't know. You,
Yeah.
let me
Yeah.
know. Is there one you got?
Yeah. Just randomly, I will mention one of my favorite shows. I did not watch a lot. I don't watch a lot of legal shows now, but I used to watch Night Court. Really loved Night Court. Night Court was a
The original
hilarious
or
show.
the
The original,
okay,
not this one. I've
Marshall
maybe seen one or
Marshall
two episodes
Warfield
with Bull, the original
with
Bull, the
Bull.
deputy.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, I
yeah,
used to love that show.
yeah.
But my favorite courtroom scene, the funniest courtroom scene is when Martin represented himself in court. And he had to cross-examine Tommy and Cole, and he's representing himself. I mean, it was absolutely hilarious. You talk about a personality all over a courtroom and a judge trying to keep control of it. I think they might have had two episodes they went to court. He might have sued somebody else, but the one where he represented himself, it doesn't get better than that in the courtroom, man. It doesn't get better than that in a courtroom.
So on a more serious note, one of those iconic scenes from I think a movie is A Time to Kill.
Oh yeah.
And you got the courtroom scene with Matthew
Hmm.
McConaughey, and he's representing Samuel L. Jackson, and the story goes, his daughter was sexually assaulted,
Hmm.
and Matthew McConaughey is describing to the jury, what happened to this young lady, what happened to this girl, and he gets to the end of the description, and imagine if she was white, and it was, nobody saw that coming. And I mean, you talk about a very powerful scene, from a courtroom, again, you know, probably not something that you're going to see in, a circuit court or a district court, but that moment just really captured, how powerful things can happen and do happen. And although, we don't see, the courtroom drama looks a lot different, in real court. But, you know, we just have to be mindful that the drama that we see on television and the drama, while they might look different, in the actual courtroom, that's somebody's life. And so we just have to be mindful of that, as judges, so yeah, I don't know. So any closing thoughts?
No, man. Listen, it's been a pleasure. We are 3 episodes deep. Looking forward to continuing this thing. We are off to a good start, man. Just pleasure to keep doing this with you, my brother.
Yeah, no, yeah, likewise. And some things I think we got planned. I think eventually we're gonna start having guests on.
Yeah,
And I've
yeah.
I've I've already kind of got one person in mind. And well, I
Oh,
mean, I've got several. Yeah, I
I
mean,
was
I've
gonna
got
say
several.
I got 2 pages in a notebook. We got plenty of guests. It's whether or not we can get them on, whether or not they want to come sit down, and talk to
Yeah,
us
yeah, 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 yeah.
unscripted.
Yes,
But
yes, yes, yeah,
we
yeah,
got a
yeah.
list of guests.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
there's one in particular that I think that for our first guest, you know, it would be a home run right out the gate. And but we'll hold on to that
We'll get there.
for
We'll
another
get there.
time.
We'll get
So
there.
and
We're just a fledgling podcast at this point. Gotta get our
yeah,
weight up. We gotta get our weight up.
but one of the things I will preview for the folks is eventually we're going to be recording together, and I look forward to that coming.
Yes.
Hopefully
And
this fall.
no Michigan background. Where is
Oh,
it?
I'm gonna wear my
Is this
jersey.
is
I'm gonna wear my
Michigan?
jersey. I'm gonna wear my jersey every episode. I'm gonna break it out the case, and now I got another one at home. I can put that one on. I'll leave that one in the
Smell like
case.
the funk of 40,000 years.
Another cultural reference. Hopefully, folks
Right?
will get that one.
You gotta keep up, baby. You gotta keep
Gotta
up.
keep up. You gotta keep up. Shoot. But look, again, thank y'all for all y'all support,
Yep.
and we love y'all, and we'll see y'all on the next episode.
Yes, indeed. Y'all be safe.
All right, peace.